Bitterroot Valley, late August, 1886. The air felt warm, too warm for a place that had already taken a life. Sunlight settled over the cabin roof, soft, steady, honest at first glance. It smelled like dry grass and pine. It looked like safety, but Rowan Hale did not trust it. 5 months earlier, he had buried his wife, Mara Hale, a quiet woman who had endured that cabin through one full winter. Not killed by storm, not by accident, but by something slower. The cold had come in at night. It had slipped through the seams, through the floor, through the walls. It had settled in her lungs, day after day, until each breath cost more than the last. She coughed, then she bled, then she stopped, and the fire had never gone out. Now the same cabin stood under summer light, pretending nothing had happened. Inside, the air was still. But Rowan knew better. He had felt that same stillness before. It was not warmth. It was waiting. Eli Hale, his 8-year-old son, moved quietly across the room. Alive, unaware of how close this place had already come to taking everything. Rowan stood in the far corner, the one where Mara had slept. It was still cold there, even in August. If stories like this matter to you, real ones, built on hard lessons, take a moment to like and subscribe. There's more ahead that most people never get to hear. Rowan Hale did not curse the winter. He studied the house. The logs were thick, cut wide, laid tight enough to satisfy any passing eye. But between them, the chinking had dried and cracked. Thin lines, easy to miss, wide enough for wind to find its way in. He pressed his fingers into one seam. Dust fell away. Air followed. Not strong, not loud, just steady. The floor told a worse story. Plain boards laid over open ground. No barrier, no mass, no memory. Cold rose through it without resistance. It did not rush. It settled. He moved to the fireplace. Stone, large, impressive. Built by a man who believed size meant strength. It burned hot when fed well. Flames climbed. Heat flashed. Then it vanished. The draft pulled hard. Too hard. For every breath of heat that climbed the chimney, another breath of cold slipped in from below, from behind, from every unseen crack. The fire did not warm the room. It fed the cold. Rowan stood there, watching the flames take wood and give almost nothing back. Mara Hale had slept 10 feet from that fire, and still, she had frozen. He knelt, placed his hand flat on the floorboards. The fire was burning. The wood was gone. The floor was still cold. Across Bitterroot Valley, the answer was already decided. Axes rang from dawn to dusk. Steel against wood, sharp, repetitive, certain. Men worked in lines along the tree edges, cutting, splitting, stacking. Each swing carried the same belief: more wood meant more heat. More heat meant survival. Piles rose beside every cabin, shoulder high, then higher. Dry logs stacked with care, like walls built against winter. It looked like preparation. It felt like control. Rowan Hale's pile did not match theirs. It stood lower, thinner, measured, not desperate. That difference did not go unnoticed. Men paused when they passed his place. Some looked once and kept walking. Others slowed, counted without speaking. A few said it out loud. Not enough. No anger in it, just judgment. One man lingered longer than the rest. He watched Eli moving near the doorway. Small hands, light jacket, no extra layers. The man shook his head. That boy won't last the winter in that house. The words did not rise. They settled, like cold air. Rowan heard them. He did not answer, because the man was right if the rules stayed the same. Rowan Hale did not look at the woodpile. He looked at the ground. There were years behind him that most men in the valley did not count as skill. Ditch work, root cellars, days spent below the surface, cutting into packed clay and shale with a dull blade and steady rhythm. Cold work, dirty work. But it had taught him something. Down there, the air did not bite, not like it did above. He remembered stepping into a finished cellar in late winter, frost on the outside world, ice in the creek, But inside, the air held steady. Not warm, never warm, just unchanged. Potatoes stacked in bins. Not frozen, not ruined. Breathing slow, like they were waiting. The ground did not fight the cold. It ignored it. Rowan stood behind his cabin now, facing the slope that rose up from the back wall. Clay packed tight. Veins of flat stone running through it. Damp in places where the sun never reached. Most men saw it as wasted land, too hard to farm, too uneven to build. Rowan saw something else. A place where winter had less say. For the first time since the thaw, he did not see an obstacle. He saw a direction. And he understood, in a way that needed no words, the mistake was not the fire. It was where the heat was being spent. Rowan Hale did not cut more wood the next morning. He walked past the axe, past the growing piles that lined the valley. He went to the back of the cabin and stood where the wall met the slope. Clay, stone, packed tight and quiet. It had held its ground through every season. It had not shifted. It had not cracked. It had simply stayed. That was enough. He turned back inside and faced the fireplace. Big, wasteful. Built to impress a man who had never watched a room go cold with a fire still burning. Rowan studied the opening. The draw, the way the heat rushed upward, fast and eager, leaving nothing behind. He understood the shape of the problem now. Fire rose too quickly. Air lost heat too fast. So he would slow it down. He would force it to work. He would not heat the air. He would heat what the air touches. Eli Hale stood in the doorway, watching. The boy did not ask questions. He had seen enough that winter to know answers did not come from talking. Rowan reached for the first stone. It came loose with effort. Mortar broke. Dust fell. The opening shifted shape. One stone, then another. Each piece removed was a step away from what had already failed, and a step deeper into something no one else in that valley had tried. He did not look at the woodpile again. He had already left that fight behind. Rowan Hale stepped into the hollow where the fireplace had been opened and set the pick against the back wall. For a moment, nothing moved. Then he drove it forward. The first strike did not break the earth. It answered. A dull shock traveled up the handle and into his arms. Packed clay held firm. Stone hid just beneath the surface. He struck again. And again. The rhythm came slow. Not like chopping wood. No clean split. No falling weight. Just resistance. Every inch taken, not given. The wall began to open. A shallow cut. Then a pocket. Then something that could hold a hand. Eli Hale carried the dirt out in a small wooden bucket. Back and forth. No words. No complaints. His boots left the same path in the dust each time he crossed the room. Inside, the air grew thick with soil and effort. Rowan worked lower, then forward, shaping the ground into a narrow passage. Clay broke in chunks. Shale plates slid loose and had to be pried out one by one. The space stayed tight, 2 feet across. Barely enough to turn. This was not digging for speed. It was carving for purpose. Sweat ran down his back. Hands stiffened. Shoulders burned. The work did not reward him with progress he could see from a distance. It measured itself in inches, but the shape was forming. A path. A direction that did not exist before. Eli set down the empty bucket and waited. He did not ask why they were digging into a hill instead of cutting trees. He had already learned something most men in the valley had not. Talking did not keep you warm. Working might. Word traveled faster than work. By the time the tunnel reached a few feet into the hillside, someone had already sent for Gideon Voss, the valley's master builder, a man whose houses stood straight through wind and winter. He arrived in the afternoon, tall, broad-shouldered, coat worn from years of labor, not neglect. He did not speak at first. He stood at the back of the cabin and watched Rowan Hale climb out of the narrow cut in the earth covered in clay and dust. Then he stepped closer. "What exactly are you doing?" Rowan did not answer right away. He lifted the bucket, passed it to Eli, then turned back toward the opening. "Improving the fire." Gideon looked past him, into the dark slit cut into the hill. "You're not improving anything," he said. "You're digging a hole from your hearth into the ground." He crouched, ran his hand along the edge of the tunnel. then stood again. This isn't a flu, it's a trap. Rowan kept working. Gideon's voice hardened. Smoke won't crawl through that. It won't wait for your idea to work itself out. It will turn back. Fill this room. You and the boy will never wake up. The words hung there. Not shouted, not dramatic, certain. You're digging a grave, he added. You just haven't reached the bottom yet. Eli stood still by the door. Rowan drove the pick forward again. Clay broke loose. Gideon watched one more moment, then straightened. Seal it, he said. Before the cold comes, I'll help you rebuild it the right way. Rowan stopped, looked at the opening, then at the man. No. Just one word. Flat. Final. Gideon held his gaze for a second longer. Then he turned and walked away, already certain how this would end. Gideon Voss did not get far before Rowan Hale spoke again. Not louder. Just enough to carry. Smoke doesn't like going down, Rowan said. Gideon stopped. Rowan rested the pick against the wall and wiped his hands on his coat. He did not step closer. He did not try to explain more than he needed to. It rises, he added. As long as there's somewhere higher to go. Gideon turned halfway back, not convinced, not even curious, just measuring the man in front of him. You're asking it to run through dirt before it can rise, he said. It won't. Rowan shook his head once. It will, he said, if the way out is better than the way back. No diagrams, no long reasoning, just that. The space between them held the difference. Gideon believed in direct paths. Short, strong, proven. Fire went up. Heat went up. That was the rule. Rowan was building something longer, slower, out of sight. He picked up the tool again and drove it into the clay. The sound was dull, steady. Gideon watched him for a moment more. There was no argument left to make, only a judgment. He looked at Rowan the way a man looks at something already decided. Not wrong yet, but too far gone to turn back. By the end of that week, everyone in Bitterroot Valley knew. Not the details, not the design, just the shape of it. Rowan Hale was digging from his own hearth into the hill behind his house. That was enough. The talk began low. At the well. Near the supply wagons, between swings of an axe. Not right. Not safe. Smoke's got nowhere to go. It spread without urgency. The way cold does, quiet, certain, reaching every corner. Men stopped coming by his place. Women who once nodded now looked past him. Even the sound of work changed. Conversations shifted when he walked near. Voices dropped, then stopped. One afternoon, two men came together. Not hostile, not angry, just practical. They stood outside the cabin while Eli Hale stacked small pieces of wood near the wall. The boy shouldn't be here when that thing goes wrong, one of them said. Rowan did not answer. We can take him for a while, the other added, until you fix it, or tear it out. Eli stood still, listening. Rowan stepped between them and the door. He stays. No raised voice, no explanation, just that. The men exchanged a look. Not surprised, just confirmed. Then you're on your own, one said. They left without another word. After that, no one came back. That evening, Rowan stood outside as the sun dropped behind the ridge. No voices carried from the road. No one passed. The valley had not thrown him out. It had simply closed around him and left him where he stood. The tunnel did not fail all at once. It gave warning, small pieces first, loose clay falling from the ceiling in thin lines, pebbles shifting under Rowan Hale's boots. A sound that did not belong to the steady rhythm of digging. He paused, listened, then kept working. The cut had reached deeper now, past the softer top layer, into packed clay mixed with thin plates of shale. The walls held. The roof, less certain. Rowan drove the pick forward. The ground answered back. A dull crack. Then it moved. Not fast, not loud, just enough. The ceiling dropped. Clay and stone slid down in a heavy sheet. The passage filled halfway in a single breath. The air went thick. The light from the doorway vanished. Rowan stepped back. Too late. Dust swallowed the space. It filled his mouth, his nose, his eyes. For a moment, there was nothing. No shape, no direction, just weight. And no air moving. Outside, Eli Hale heard the sound. The bucket slipped from his hands. Pa? No answer. He took a step toward the opening, stopped. The darkness inside did not move. Pa! Inside, Rowan forced himself still. Panic would waste air. He raised his hands slowly. Felt the ceiling. Lower now. Loose. He shifted one knee, then the other, clearing space with his forearms, pushing soil aside, in short, controlled movements. The passage was not gone, but it was no longer safe. After a long moment, he found the opening again, a thin line of light. Air followed it. He pulled himself out. Eli grabbed his arm, eyes wide, breathing fast. Rowan said nothing. He turned back to the collapse, studied the shape, the failure. Digging was not enough. The earth would not hold for him. He would have to make it hold. Rowan Hale did not rush the rebuild. He changed the tunnel before he finished it. The collapse section became the lesson. He set flat shale into a shallow curve, piece by piece, forming a low arch that would carry the weight above it. Clay packed tight between each stone. Ash mixed in to seal the gaps. The roof no longer relied on loose soil. It held because it was shaped to hold. The passage moved forward again, 52 feet in total. Narrow, intentional. A slight rise along its length, just enough to guide movement without resistance. The walls smoothed by hand. No sharp edges. No pockets where air could stall. At the far end of the line, he cut upward, 18 feet through the slope. Straight, tight, until it broke open into daylight on the higher ground behind the cabin. He built the outlet low to the earth, ringed in stone, where the wind moved clean across the ridge. Back inside, he rebuilt the firebox. Small, tall, closed in tight. Not a place for a wide, lazy flame. A chamber meant to burn hot and fast, forcing the fire to do its work before it could escape. Then he turned to the old chimney. It stood above the hearth like a habit. He filled it, stone first, then clay, packed deep, sealed, until no light passed through. He had closed the sky. There was only one path left, into the earth. He lit the fire at dusk. The flame took quickly, strong, focused. For a moment it held. Then a thin thread of smoke slipped back into the room. Not much, but enough. Rowan watched it rise, hesitate, and drift the wrong way. The system was built, but it was not right yet. The fire started clean. Rowan Hale fed it small, dry splits. The chamber caught fast. Flame climbed tight and bright, contained within the narrow walls of the firebox. No lazy edges, no drifting smoke at first. The draw began. Heat pushed forward into the tunnel, out of sight. The way he had planned. For a few minutes, it held. Then something shifted. Not in the fire, in the air. A faint haze appeared near the opening of the firebox. Thin, easy to miss. It did not rush. It gathered. Rowan watched it. The smoke did not commit to the tunnel. It slowed, turned, tested the room behind it. A small thread slipped free and drifted back into the cabin. Eli Hale coughed. Just once. But it was enough. Rowan moved immediately. He closed the draft, broke the flame, killed the fire before it could build pressure the wrong way. Silence returned. But it was not the same silence as before. The system had spoken, and it had not agreed with him. He stood there, eyes on the opening, tracing the path in his mind. Every inch of it, the rise, the width, the distance. Something in that path was easier to resist than to follow. The smoke had chosen the shorter way, back. Eli wiped his mouth with the back of his sleeve, said nothing. But he stayed near the door. Rowan did not look at him. He did not need to. He already understood what the next failure would cost. If the system failed again, it would not be theory. It would be breath. And breath did not give second chances. Rowan Hale did not light the fire again that night. He sat in the dim room and rebuilt the path in his head. Not the idea. The movement. Where the heat slowed, where it hesitated, where it found it easier to turn back than to go forward. In the morning, he went back into the tunnel. He did not dig deeper. He changed what was already there. The floor of the passage was too level, the rise too slight to pull the flow with any certainty. Smoke had no reason to commit. It could wander, so he gave it a reason. He cut the floor upward by inches, not enough to see from the entrance, just enough to guide movement. A slow, steady incline, no more than a few degrees, but consistent. Then he moved to the widest section. Too much space. Heat spread out there. Lost speed. Lost direction. He narrowed it. Stone on both sides. Drawn inward. A tight throat where the air would have to gather, compress, and move as one. Not faster by force. Faster by necessity. Eli Hale passed him the flat shale pieces, one at a time, quiet, watching. Rowan set each one with care, clay pressed in by hand, ash mixed in to seal and smooth. No rough edges, no pockets, nothing for the flow to catch on. The tunnel was no longer just a hole in the ground. It was a shaped path, a decision made in earth and stone. He worked until the light outside shifted and the air cooled. Then he climbed out, did not speak, did not test it yet, because this time he would not ask the fire to prove him right. He would make it so it had no other choice. Rowan Hale waited until the air turned colder. Not winter cold, not yet, but enough to test the difference. He built the fire the same way. Small splits, dry wood, tight chamber, no excess. The flame took quickly. Clean, focused. It climbed the narrow box without spreading wide. Heat gathered instead of flashing out. Rowan watched the opening. The first minute passed, then another. No smoke returned. Nothing curled back into the room. No haze. No hesitation. The air stayed clear. The tunnel had made its choice. So had the fire. He fed it once more. Let it burn steady for an hour. Then another. Not a large blaze. Not the kind that filled a room with heat you could feel on your face. This was quieter, less obvious. When the fire burned down to coals, Rowan did not add more. He waited. The change did not come all at once. It rose slowly. The edge of the cold lifted first. The sharpness left the air. The room did not feel warm, but it no longer felt like it was losing. Rowan stepped across the floor, stopped, waited. The boards beneath his boots no longer pulled heat away. They held. Eli Hale watched him, then lowered himself to sit. He stayed still for a second, testing without knowing he was testing. Then he reached down, untied one boot, pulled it off, set his bare foot on the floor. He did not pull it back. Rowan said nothing. He did not need to. The fire had done its work, and for the first time, it had stayed. Winter arrives without warning. There was no long warning. One morning, the valley woke to a different sky. Clear, hard, empty of color. By midday, the temperature had dropped past 10 below. By night, it pushed past 20. The next day, it reached 30 below. Then lower, minus 45. The air changed shape. Breath no longer drifted, it snapped. Broke apart in front of the face. Each inhale cut sharp and dry, like something ground into powder. Wind followed, not in gusts, in force. It pressed against the walls, found every seam, every weakness. It did not rush through the cabin. It leaned into it, steady and patient, waiting for something to give. Snow came with it, fine at first, then thicker, then constant. Within hours, the valley disappeared. White moved across everything, roofs, paths, fences, the ground itself. Distance vanished. Sound vanished with it. The world narrowed to what stood within arm's reach. And the color changed. Not white, blue. A flat, silent blue that held no warmth and no movement. The kind that settled in and stayed. Across Bitterroot Valley, fires were lit early. Fed harder. Doors stayed shut. Windows sealed. Men moved faster. Spoke less. Because this was not weather. This was judgment. And it had already begun. In the distance, A sharp crack split the silence, a tree breaking under its own frozen weight. The valley heard it and understood. Gideon Voss did what he had always done. He built the fire bigger. Logs went in thick, dry, split clean. The flames rose fast and wide, filling the stone mouth of the fireplace with heat that looked strong enough to push winter back on its own. For a moment it worked. The air near the hearth softened. Hands thawed, faces warmed, but it did not last. 10 feet away, the room stayed cold. The corners held it, quiet and stubborn. It did not rush in. It waited until the fire dropped, then moved back across the floor like it had never left. Gideon added more wood, then more. The fire grew louder, hotter, hungrier, and still the heat did not travel. It stayed where it was born. Behind him, along the outer wall, a thin white pattern began to form. Frost. Not outside, inside. It crept along the seams of the logs, spreading in fine lines that looked delicate and harmless until you touched them. The wood beneath was freezing. His family pulled closer to the hearth. Blankets layered over shoulders, feet tucked tight beneath them. The circle of warmth shrank. Everything outside that circle belonged to the cold. Gideon moved again, fed the fire harder, faster. The pile beside the wall dropped lower with each hour. He knew how much he had cut. He knew how long it should last. It was not enough. A small voice broke from behind him. "It's still cold." No complaint in it, just truth. The fire burned, the wood was gone, and the house was losing. Rowan Hale did not build a larger fire. He built a shorter one. At first light, he lit the chamber. Small splits. Dry wood. Tight burn. The flame rose clean and strong, then settled into a steady draw that pulled through the earth without hesitation. He fed it once, then he let it die. The heat did not leave with the flame. It stayed behind. By midday, the room felt different. Not warm in the way a fire announces itself. No hot face. No bright surge. Just the absence of loss. The air did not move. No draft slipped under the door. No cold crept along the seams. The floor held steady, not biting, not pulling heat from the body that touched it. Eli Hale sat down without thinking about it. He laid out his small wooden figures and pushed them across the boards. No shoes. No hurry. No flinch when his bare heel pressed flat. Rowan watched him for a moment, then turned to the back wall. That was where Mara Hale had slept. That was where the cold had stayed longest. He stepped closer, raised his hand, and pressed it to the wood. The warmth there was not sharp, not temporary. It did not fade when he held it. It came from deeper than the room. From the earth beyond it. He kept his hand there longer than he needed to, not to test the system, but to measure the difference. That night, the fire burned once more. Brief, controlled. When it died, the cabin did not fall back into the cold. It held. For the first time, Rowan lay down and listened. No coughing, no broken breath, only still air, and quiet. By the 5th day, the woodpile was gone. Not low. Gone. Gideon Voss stood in the doorway and looked at the space where it had been stacked. Clean ground. No reserve. No margin left to work with. Inside, the fire still burned, but not the way it had before. Smaller now. Fed with what remained chair legs, broken boards, anything that would catch. The flame was no longer a tool. It was a last line. Behind him, his daughter lay wrapped in blankets. Too still. Her breathing had changed. Shallow, uneven. Each breath took effort, as if the air itself had weight. His wife pressed a hand to the girl's forehead, then looked up. No words. She did not need to ask. Gideon already knew. He moved back to the fire. Stood there for a moment, watching it consume what little was left of the room. This was not how it was supposed to go. He had built stronger than this. Smarter than this. For 30 years, he had trusted what he knew. Now it was failing in front of him. Fast. He reached for his coat, layered what he could, wrapped cloth over his mouth. The door opened. The cold struck immediately. Not wind first, cold. It hit the chest, stopped the breath, forced it back out in a sharp, empty burst. Then the wind followed, driving it deeper. Gideon stepped into it. The world outside was blue and silent. No tracks, no shape. Just distance swallowed whole. He knew where he was going. He also knew what it meant. If he was wrong, he would not make it back. He closed the door behind him and walked into the cold anyway. The distance was not far. It felt long. Gideon Voss walked bent into the wind, one hand shielding his face, the other held close to his chest to keep feeling in his fingers. The cold took hold fast. It did not ease. It pressed deeper with every step. Shapes were gone. The valley had narrowed to a few yards of sight. Then something held. A light, faint at first, then steady. A dull yellow square against the blue. Rowan Hale's cabin. Gideon stopped, stared at it through the drifting snow. There should have been smoke. There was none. No dark plume. No sign of a large fire forcing heat into the sky. Just that light. He moved closer, slow, careful. The steps felt uncertain now, not from distance, but from doubt. He reached the door, raised his hand, knocked. The sound was swallowed almost as soon as it left his knuckles. For a moment, nothing answered. Then a shift inside. Wood moving. A bar lifting free. The door opened. Rowan stood there. No heavy coat. No panic in his face. Just stillness. And warmth. Not the kind that strikes the skin. Not a blast. It moved outward. Quiet. Even. It reached Gideon and settled over him before he understood what it was. He stepped across the threshold. Behind him, the cold stayed outside. Inside, there was no roar of fire, no rush of heat, no smoke hanging in the air. Only a room that did not feel like it was losing. Gideon stopped and did not take another step, because nothing in front of him matched what he knew should be there. Gideon Voss did not speak. He stepped farther into the room and looked for the fire. It was there, but not where it should have been. No wide hearth, no open flame climbing high enough to claim the room. Only a small, contained chamber near the back, its fire already past its peak. Coals now, quiet, controlled. That was not enough. It could not be enough. He moved closer, waited for the cold to return as he left the doorway. It did not. He turned, slowly, taking in the space, the walls, the corners, the places that should have held the chill. They did not. Gideon reached out, pressed his hand against the back wall. He held it there. Not hot, not sharp, but steady. The kind of warmth that did not fade while you touched it. He pulled his hand back, then lowered it to the floor. Same result. The wood held the heat, gave it back slowly, evenly. Not from the fire in front of him, from something deeper. He looked up at Rowan Hale. Nothing in the man's face asked for agreement. Nothing needed to be explained. The proof was under his hand. Gideon took a step back, then lowered himself to one knee. Not from weakness, from the weight of it. Every house he had built, every fire he had trusted, every winter he had fought the same way. All of it stood against what he was feeling now. He had not been close to right. He had been wrong, completely. And for the first time, he understood why. Gideon Voss stayed on one knee for a long moment. Then he lifted his head. How? It came out rough. Not as a challenge, not as doubt. As a request. Rowan Hale did not answer with words first. He stepped to the hearth, took a piece of charcoal from the edge, and knelt beside the open floor. He drew slowly. A small firebox. Tall, narrow, closed. From it, a long line running into the hill, not straight, slightly rising. Then another line, farther out, vertical. The exit. Gideon leaned closer. Rowan spoke only when the shape was clear. You make the fire burn hot, he said, so it finishes what it starts. He tapped the first line. Then you don't let the heat leave. His hand moved along the drawn path. You make it travel. You make it give up what it carries. He pressed the charcoal into the wood, to the stone, to the ground. Gideon followed the line to the end, and then Rowan wiped the edge of the drawing with his hand. Then you let it go. That night, Gideon left with more than warmth. He left with a map. Winter held for another week. Then it broke. When the cold lifted, the valley stepped outside and counted what remained. This time, no doors stayed closed, no cabins silent. Gideon came back before the snow had fully melted. Not to argue, to learn. Together, they built it again. Cleaner, stronger, repeatable. Word spread, not as a story, as a method. The next winter, fires burned smaller, houses held longer, and no one in that valley froze in their sleep. Rowan did not leave his land, did not take credit, did not explain more than he had to. His work stayed where he built it, in the ground, in the walls. In the quiet change that followed, on the ridge behind his cabin, a thin line of pale smoke rose from the outlet in the earth. It did not carry heat. It had already given it away, everything it could, before it was allowed to leave. What would you have done? Keep feeding a bigger fire, or dig into the earth and force the heat to stay?